What if every decision you made, from the food you eat to the clothes you wear to the moment you stand up to get a glass of water, had to pass through somebody else first? You don't get told no outright. You just learn that nothing moves forward until they've had their say. Every choice you make is quietly run through an invisible checkpoint. You pause before moving. You edit your words before speaking. You picture the reaction you'll get before you've even decided what you want. An unspoken system hovers over your life where everything you do, say, or plan is weighed against someone else's approval. The small acts, getting up from the couch, walking out the door, sending a message, carry an invisible weight. That weight presses down upon you. Hesitation becomes instinct. The calculation is automatic. The urge to act freely fades, and it's replaced by constant awareness of how your decisions will be received. The question you ask yourself is no longer, what do I want? But, will I be allowed to? So now, every moment seeks approval. You live in fear of disapproval. You stand the way that she wants. You breathe the way that she wants. You make her cup of tea exactly the way she wants. I remember it clearly. The water had to hit the cup the instant the kettle boiled. If I wasn't there waiting for that kettle to click, she would know. The tea bag had to stay in for precisely 3 minutes, not a second shorter and not a second longer. The tea bag had to come out, the milk go in, straight in her hand without any delay. It sounds silly, it sounds small, but these moments where even a cup of tea are proof of who is in control. This is a lack of agency, a part of the control and suppression tactics within the blueprint of family violence against men, and it's the focus of today's episode. We're going to explore 5 ways that your agency is chipped away until you no longer have the ability to make your own decisions. If this content is of value to you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. Before we get into the 5 ways, let's start by exploring a lack of agency in depth. Lack of agency is the slow, deliberate removal of your ability to make decisions for yourself. It happens through repetition, conditioning you to seek permission, second guess your own judgment, and eventually surrender control over your life. It often begins disguised as care, concern, or a need to be on the same page. You might be asked to check in before going somewhere or to confirm before making a choice. At first, the requests feel harmless. Over time, they grow into expectations, and then they grow into rules. Rules you never discussed, but somehow follow without question. Soon, every action, from the smallest errand to the most important decision, runs through their unspoken approval system. You learn their patterns, the tone in their voice, the subtle pauses, the look that means you've stepped outside the lines. Your own instincts fade as you adjust to avoid those reactions. The system reaches deep into your life, shaping not just what you do, but how you think. Decisions are no longer yours to make alone. You start to delay, to explain, to soften your choices before they are spoken. Even the most basic acts, leaving the house, buying something small, making plans with friends, carry the weight of anticipated judgment. For men, the erosion cuts at the core of identity. Independence and decisiveness are traits we are told to value. When those are stripped away, quietly and without witness, the loss feels deep. You begin to move through the world with hesitation, carrying the constant awareness of someone else's authority over you. A lack of agency embeds itself into the rhythms of your life until compliance becomes instinct. The relationship stops being a place where you live freely and instead becomes a space where every choice is shaped, filtered, and measured against the will of another person. Let's take a look at 5 subtle ways your agency is eroded away. The first way your decision making is eroded away is through unsolicited gatekeeping. Unsolicited gatekeeping is when the abuser inserts themselves into your decisions by granting permission, even when none was asked for or required. It's not overt denial, it's not explosive control, it's more insidious. They offer a casual, go ahead, or sure, if you must, in response to something you simply stated, subtly recasting your personal decisions as things that need their approval. Unsolicited gatekeeping sounds like you casually mentioning that you're going to do something, like, I might go for a run. And they respond as if you are asking them for approval with, yeah, sure, you go for it. Or you make a personal choice and they insert themselves with a gatekeeping phrase. I suppose that's okay. They offer approval for harmless things in a way that casts doubt. If you really think that's a good idea, their behavior reframes autonomy as something granted, not owned. Over time, it reshapes a power dynamic. You may still technically do the thing, but the script changes internally. Your choice passes through them first, and you begin to internalize that framing, hesitating, deferring, or softening your actions in anticipation of their reaction. And you stop stating things with confidence and instead soften them into questions or suggestions. I always think maybe I could. Dot dot dot. Over time, you start to feel like permission is expected, even for decisions that affect only you. This tactic is particularly dangerous because it hides under the guise of care or interest. It sounds supportive, even permissive, but it's not about encouragement. It's about establishing a hierarchy where your agency is always second to theirs. The second way your agency is eroded is through mandatory check ins. Mandatory check ins are framed as caring, respectful, or considerate, but function as surveillance. You're expected to notify, explain, or seek approval for everyday actions. Over time, what began as shared awareness becomes a behavioral leash. The problem isn't mutual communication, it's that only one person is expected to report in and punished, guilted, or shamed when they don't. This is not the same as sharing out of love or thoughtfulness. This is reporting under threat of disapproval. The tone is subtle at first. I would have expected you to let me know. Later, it becomes snide comments, accusations of selfishness, or even stonewalling. You're not checking in because you want to, you're doing it to avoid conflict, disappointment, or guilt. For men, this type of control is often very invisible. In a culture where asking your wife is normalized, even joked about, this pattern flies well under that radar. But flip the genders, and the dynamic would be called out instantly. That's a double standard, one that quietly erodes autonomy while being passed off as respect. Over time, the mental load grows. You preemptively seek approval, avoid activities that might require permission, or alter your plans to sidestep confrontation. You're no longer living freely. You're managing perception and avoiding punishment. The third way you lose agency in a relationship is through decision invalidations. Decision invalidations occur when independent choices are routinely dismissed, criticized, or even reversed. Not because the decision itself is unsound, but because it was made without their involvement or approval. Over time, your autonomy is eroded not through force, but through repeated correction, contradiction, and emotional penalties. At its core, this type of control isn't about the decision, it's about who gets to make it. Whether it's what to cook, how to spend, where to live, or how to parent, your judgment is framed as flawed, impulsive, or inconsiderate. Even decisions that are reasonable, thoughtful, or shared are later revised, critiqued, or reattributed. The result is you stop trusting your ability to choose, or you stop choosing altogether. For men, this tactic often masquerades as normal compromise or sharing responsibility, but the pattern reveals itself in who is allowed to speak last, who needs to justify themselves, and whose version of logic ultimately wins. It's not partnership, it's positioning. The fourth way you lose agency is through emotion based decision shaping. Emotion based decision shaping happens when your choices aren't made freely. They're made in anticipation of how your partner will emotionally react. This is where you might avoid doing things you enjoy because you know it will trigger a bad mood. Or you choose gifts, events, or words not based on what you want to express, but on what will get a good reaction. You might even cancel plans or delay purchases or alter routines to sidestep potential upset from your partner. You find yourself rehearsing how to frame things to avoid backlash and anticipate their disapproval and adjust accordingly, even when they haven't said anything yet. And sadly, you feel relief when something you want aligns with what they want, because it means you can finally choose it without guilt. Over time, their moods, triggers, and preferences become the invisible compass you navigate by. You begin to weigh every action, not by what feels right to you, but by what will avoid that conflict, or earn praise, or just even maintain calm. This isn't about mutual care or healthy compromise. In a safe relationship, you naturally consider each other's feelings, but you're not governed by them. Emotion based shaping is different. It rewires your decision making around only their appeasement and avoidance of their displeasure. Has nothing to do with your feelings and your emotions. Even when they're not present, their emotional landscape looms large in your mind, guiding what you do, say, buy, wear, or plan. It's not always driven by fear. Sometimes it's about trying to make them happy because you've learned that harmony only comes when they get their way. But the result is the same. Your instincts take a back seat and your internal compass gets replaced by theirs. The fifth way your agency is eroded is through false collaboration. On the surface, this tactic looks like partnership. You're invited into a conversation, asked for your opinion, and encouraged to share your thoughts. But the outcome has already been decided. What you say doesn't shape the decision, it only shapes how long it takes to arrive at the same predetermined end. When you disagree, your logic is attacked. You might get emotional appeals used to override your logic, like, you're just being difficult. Why can't you just support me for once? Or the conversation is dragged on until you give in. And past moments of input are then referenced to suggest you actually had a say, even when you know you didn't. It's not collaboration, it's control dressed as consensus. Over time, you learn that speaking up is performative, that no matter how thoughtful your reasoning, the conclusion won't change. So you either submit or stay silent, telling yourself it's not worth the argument. In doing so, your voice is gradually trained out of the process. What remains is compliance, cloaked in the illusion of agreement. For men, a lack of agency inside a relationship is one of the easiest control tactics to miss, both for ourselves and for those around us. We grow up with the idea that men lead, make decisions, and act independently. So when those same men start needing to check in before every move, it should stand out as alarming. But it doesn't. It gets laughed off. Phrases like, let me see if I'm allowed to, or I better check with the boss, are treated as harmless jokes when a man says them. They're woven into everyday banter, sitcom punchlines, and casual conversation. No one stops to question whether the man is joking or whether there's something serious behind those words. This normalization makes it harder for men to see the control for what it is. We tell ourselves it's just about being considerate, about communicating. We dismiss the unease because everybody else does. But over time, the permission seeking becomes routine, so ingrained that it feels like part of the relationship rather than the red flag it is. By the time we notice how much freedom we've handed over, we've already learnt to live inside someone else's rule. A lack of agency builds slowly, almost without notice. Small permissions become routine. Moments of hesitation turn into habits. Over time, the pattern settles until your life is no longer shaped by your own decisions, but by the need to align with someone else's expectations. Each delayed choice, each softened statement, each decision abandoned to avoid disapproval strengthens the idea that their voice comes before yours. The more you adapt, the more natural it feels to operate inside their boundaries, even when those boundaries were never agreed to or spoken aloud. After years of living this way, it can be difficult to remember what real independence felt like. You stop seeing where the boundaries end and where you begin. This is the true cost of losing agency. It doesn't just limit what you do, it reshapes who you are. Rebuilding starts with noticing where permission has replaced self direction. It means paying attention to the smallest decisions, recognizing the moments you pause out of habit, and choosing to act for yourself again. One choice at a time, you reclaim the space to live by your own voice. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.